to Ingersoll. I hated his guts. He was carrying his lily-livered pacifism right to the White House, and I couldn't see it, so I fought him every inch of the way. I'll fight what he stands for now he's dead." Chander's eyes narrowed. "That was a mistake, Mariel. You weren't supposed to know he is dead." He walked over to the little man, whose face was a shade whiter yet. "Funny," said Chander quietly. "You say you hated him, but I didn't get that impression at all." Mariel's eyes opened wide. "What do you mean?" "Everything you wrote for the PIB seems to have treated him kindly." A shadow of deep concern crossed Mariel's face, as though for the first time he found himself in deep water. "PIB told me what to write, and I wrote it. You know how they work." "Yes, I know how they work. I also know that most of your writing, while you were doing Public Information Board work, was never ordered by PIB. Ever hear of Ben Chamberlain, Mariel? Or Frank Eberhard? Or John Harding? Ever hear of them, Mariel?" Chander's voice cut sharply through the room. "Ben Chamberlain wrote for a very large circulation magazine in the country after the Chinese War. Frank Eberhard was the man behind Associated Press during those years. John Harding was the silent publisher of 3 newspapers in Washington, 2 in New York, and 1 in Chicago. Ever hear of those men, Mariel?" "No, no." "You know damned well you've heard of them, because those men were all you. Every single one of them." Chander was standing close to him now, and Mariel sat like he had seen a ghost, his lower lip quivering, forehead wet. "No, no, you're wrong." "No, no, I'm right," mocked Chander. "I've been in the newspaper racket for a long time, Mariel. I've got friends in PIB, real friends. Not the shamus crowd you're acquainted with that'll take you for your last nickel and then leave you to starve. Never mind how I found out. You hated Ingersoll so much you handed him bouquets all the time. How about it, Mariel? All that writing. You couldn't praise him enough. Boosting him, beating the drum for him and his policies. Every trick and gimmick known in the propaganda game to give him a boost, make him the people's darling. How about it?" Mariel was shaking his head, his little eyes nearly popping with fright. "It wasn't him," he choked. "Ingersoll had nothing to do with it. It was Dartmouth Baring. They bought me into the spots. Got me the newspapers, supported me. Dartmouth Baring ran the whole works, and they told me what to write." "Garbage! Dartmouth Baring, the biggest munitions people in America, and I'm supposed to believe that they told you to go to bat for the country's strongest pacifist. What kind of sap do you take me for?" "It's true. Ingersoll had nothing to do with it, nothing at all." Mariel's voice was almost pleading. "Look, I don't know what Dartmouth Baring had in mind. Who was I to ask questions? You don't realize their power, Chander. Those bonds I spoke of, they hold millions of dollars worth of bonds. They hold enough bonds to topple the economy of the nation. They've got bonds in the names of 10,000 subsidiary companies. They've been telling Federal Economics Commission what to do for the past 10 years. And they're getting us into this war, Chander, lock, stock, and barrel. They pushed for everything they could get, and they had the money, the power, the men to do whatever they wanted. You couldn't fight them because they had everything sewed up so tight nobody could approach them." Chander's mind was racing, the missing pieces beginning, suddenly, to come out of the haze. The incredible, twisted idea broke through again, staggering him, driving through his mind like icy steel. "Listen, Mariel, I swear I'll kill you if you lie to me, so you'd better tell the truth. Who put you on my trail? Who told you Ingersoll was dead, and that I was scraping up Ingersoll's past?" The little man twisted his hands, almost in tears. "Harry Dartmouth told me." "And who told Harry Dartmouth?" Mariel's voice was so weak it could hardly be heard. "The girl," he said. Chander felt the chill deepen. "And where are the files now?" "Dartmouth has them. Probably in Chicago. I expressed them." The girl didn't dare send them direct, for fear you would check, or that she was being watched. I was supposed to pick them up from you, and see to it that you didn't remember." Shandor clenched his fist. "Where are Dartmouth's plants located?" "The main plants are in Chicago and Newark. They've got a smaller one in Nevada." "And what do they make?" "In peacetime, cars. In wartime they make tanks and shells." "And their records, inventories, shipping orders and files, where do they keep them?" I don't know. You aren't thinking of—" "Never mind what I'm thinking of. Just answer up. Where are they?" "All the administration offices are in Chicago, but they'd kill you, Shandor. You wouldn't stand a chance. They can't be fought, I tell you." Shandor nodded to Prex and started for the door. "Keep him here until dawn, then go on home, and forget what you heard. If anything happens, give me a ring at my home." He glared at Mariel. "Don't worry about me, Bud. They won't be doing anything to me when I get through with them. They just won't be doing anything at all." The idea had crystallized as he talked to Mariel. Shandor's mind was whirling as he walked down toward the thoroughfare. Incredulously, he tried to piece the picture together. He had known Dartmouth Baring was big, but that big? Mariel might have been talking nonsense, or he might have been reading the gospel. Shandor hailed a cab, sat in the back seat scratching his head. How big could Dartmouth Baring be? Could any corporation be that big? He thought back, remembering the rash of post-war scandals and profit-gouging trials, the antitrust trials. In wartime, bars are let down. No one can look with disfavor on the factories making the weapons. And if one corporation could buy and expand, and buy some more, it might be too powerful to be prosecuted after the war. Shandor shook his head, realizing he was skirting the big issue. Dartmouth Baring connected up, in some absurd fashion, but there was a missing link. Mariel fit into one side of the puzzle, interlocking with Dartmouth. The stolen files might even fit, for that matter. But the idea grew stronger. A great jagged piece in the middle of the puzzle was missing, the key piece which would tie everything together. He felt his skin prickle as he thought. An impossible idea, and yet, he realized, if it were true, everything else would fall clearly into place. He sat bolt upright. It had to be true. He leaned forward and gave the cabbie the landing field address, then sat back, feeling his pulse pounding through his arms and legs. Nervously he switched on the radio. The dial fell to some jazz music, which he tolerated for a moment or two, then flipped to a news broadcast. Not that news broadcasts really meant much, but he wanted to hear the Ingersoll story released for the day. He listened impatiently to a roundup of local news. David Ingersoll stricken with pneumonia. 3 senators protesting the current tax bill. He brought his attention around sharply at the sound of a familiar name. Disappearing from his Chicago home early this morning, Mr. Dartmouth is president of Dartmouth Baring Corporation, currently engaged in the manufacture of munitions for defense, and producing much of the machinery being used at the moon rocket in Arizona. Police are following all possible leads, and are confident that there has been no foul play. On the international scene, the Kremlin is still blocking. Shandor snapped off the radio abruptly, his forehead damp. Dartmouth disappeared, and with him the files. Why? And where to go now to find them? If the idea that was plaguing him was true, sound valid, he'd have to have the files. His whole body was wet with perspiration as he reached the landing field. The trip to the Library of Congress seemed endless, yet he knew that the library wouldn't be open until 8 o'clock anyway. Suddenly he felt a wave of extreme weariness sweep over him. When had he last slept? Bored, he snapped the telephone switch and rang PIB offices for his mail. To his surprise, John Hart took the wire, and exploded in his ear. "Where in the hell have you been? I've been trying to get you all night." "Listen, Tom, drop the Ingersoll story cold, and get in here. The faster the better." Chandler blinked. Drop the story? You're crazy. Get in here, roared Hart. From now on, you've really got a job. The Berlin conference blew up tonight, Tom. High as a kite. We're at war with Russia. Carefully, Chandler popped the receiver down on its hook, his hands like ice. Just one item first, he thought. Just one thing I've got to know. Then back to the PIB, maybe. He found a booth in the library and began hunting, time pressing him into frantic speed. The idea was incredible, but it had to be true. He searched the microfilm files for 3 hours before he found it in a who's who, dating back to 1958, 3 years before the war with China. A simple, innocuous listing, which froze him to his seat. He read it unbelievingly, yet knowing that it was the only possible link. Finally he read it again. David P. Ingersoll, born 1922, married 1947. Educated at Rutgers University and MIT, worked as administrator for the International Harvester until 1955. Taught Harvard University from 1955 to 1957. David P. Ingersoll becoming in 1958 the executive president of Dartmouth Bearing Corporation. End of section 2.